Hello, and welcome to our podcast episode number 111, The Haunting Returns. Survival in a Silent World continues. I'm Thomas, and I am here with my friend Timothy. Today, we are going to discuss a film called A Quiet Place, Part 2nd. A warm welcome to you, dear viewer, to our film night.
A Quiet Place, Part 2nd is a 2020 American post-apocalyptic horror film about a family navigating the world inhabited by blind aliens with an acute sense of hearing. They continue their survival journey after witnessing a meteorite strike and losing loved ones to the creatures. Well, Tom, did you enjoy A Quiet Place, Part 2nd?
Oh, Timothy sigh, I knew you wouldn't like it. It's a horror film, for heaven's sake. I thought it was an all-right sequel. The world building is quite impressive, and the suspense kept me on edge throughout the whole film. Emily Blunt and Cillian Murphy did a fantastic job portraying their characters' desperate fight for survival.
Well, Tom, I don't understand why anyone would find joy in watching people scream their lungs out or get eaten alive by these monsters. It's simply not my cup of tea. I'd rather watch a documentary about the restoration of old cathedral organs. At least there I can appreciate the craftsmanship and artistry involved, instead of being terrorized by some CG nightmare.
But, Timothy, that's part of the appeal of horror films. It's like a roller coaster ride, you know? You're terrified but also thrilled by the adrenaline rush. And besides, there are elements of survival and family love intertwined in A Quiet Place, Part 2nd, that make it more than just about jumping out of your seat.
Maybe I am a bit too old for these tricks, Tom. But let's not debate our taste in films right now. What did you think of the plot? Did it manage to keep your attention despite my disdain for horrors?
Well, Timothy, I thought the plot was well structured, following the main character's journey to find safety and avenge her fallen family members. While it does stray away from the original A Quiet Place's unique premise of being trapped in one location, the expanded world building provided fresh challenges for the protagonist and kept me engaged throughout the film. The tension built up slowly but surely, culminating in a climactic confrontation that left me on edge of my seat. However, I did find some parts of the story a bit predictable, especially towards the end, when certain plot twists were telegraphed quite clearly. Despite these minor flaws, A Quiet Place Part 2nd managed to keep me hooked till the very end. The film's use of sound and silence was particularly effective in creating suspenseful moments that made my heart race and hair stand on end.
Well, Tom, I suppose you can expect a sequel to match its predecessor's originality forever. But what about the performances? Emily Blunt is always a joy to watch, and Cillian Murphy did an admirable job of playing her reluctant partner in AM Crime. However, I found myself more drawn to Noah Jupe's portrayal of Regan's deaf son. He brought a much-needed sense of innocence and hope to the otherwise bleak world of A Quiet Place Part 2nd. His struggle to communicate with his hearing parents despite being born deaf was heartwarming, and his journey to find his own place in this new reality was truly moving. Overall, while A Quiet Place Part 2nd may not be a masterpiece of cinematic brilliance, it does deliver on its core promise to provide thrills and chills to horror enthusiasts like you, Tim. But now that we've discussed the plot and performances, do you have any interesting trivia about the film to share with our dear viewers?
Well, Timothy, I do have one little tidbit of trivia for our viewers. Did you know that the sound design team behind A Quiet Place Part 2nd had to create over 300 unique sounds for the aliens to make it feel more realistic? They recorded everything from footsteps on leaves and breathing techniques to capture every tiny noise the creatures would make. And in some scenes, director John Krasinski even used real-life insects like crickets and cicadas to create a more immersive atmosphere of eerie silence, punctuated by sudden bursts of sound. This attention to detail really elevates the film's overall experience for me. Now, I know you're not a fan of horror films in general, Timothy, but even you have to admit that A Quiet Place Part Second succeeds in creating an atmosphere of suspense and dread that keeps you on edge throughout its runtime. What do you think about the film's use of sound and silence as a narrative tool?
Well, Tom, I must admit that the use of sound and silence in A Quiet Place Part Second was masterfully executed. The filmmakers did an excellent job of creating a sense of dread and suspense by manipulating these two elements to their advantage. The scenes where characters had to tiptoe around objects or communicate through sign language were particularly nerve-wracking, as the slightest sound could potentially alert the creatures. And when the action finally did erupt, the explosions of noise and light were so visceral that I found myself gripping my chair tightly out of pure adrenaline. However, I must also point out that some of the CG effects in the film left a lot to be desired. While the aliens themselves looked quite convincing up close, their movements during certain action scenes were somewhat clumsy and noticeably computer-generated. This detracted from the overall realism that the film had so carefully built up until that point. Nevertheless, these minor hiccups didn't completely derail my enjoyment of A Quiet Place Part Second as a whole. So, Tom, now that we've discussed the plot performances and the use of sound and silence in the film, I would like to shift gears and ask you something about the actors themselves. Emily Blunt has mentioned in an interview that she had to learn sign language for her role as Evelyn. How did she fare in portraying a character who is deaf-mute? And what about Cillian Murphy's transformation into a reluctant action hero? Did he bring something new to the table compared to his previous roles?
Well, Timothy, Emily Blunt's portrayal of Evelyn was nothing short of impressive. She effectively conveyed the character's desperation and determination to protect her family at all costs. The scenes where she had to communicate silently with Regan and Marcus were particularly moving, showcasing her ability to convey complex emotions through subtle gestures and facial expressions. As for Cillian Murphy, he certainly brought a different dimension to his character's arc. Initially reluctant to join the fight against the aliens, his character gradually evolves into a fierce protector of the group, embracing his newfound role as a reluctant action hero. His chemistry with Emily Blunt's Evelyn was tangible, adding an unexpected layer of depth and humanity to their relationship amidst all the chaos. Now, let's talk about Noah Jupe's performance as Regan's deaf son, played by the talented young actor. He truly shone in his portrayal of a boy who is both terrified and determined to find his place in this new world. His struggle to communicate with his hearing parents while navigating his own sense of loss and isolation was heartbreakingly realistic. Jupe's performance earned him critical acclaim for a reason, as he seamlessly conveyed the character's range of emotions without resorting to over-dramatization or melodrama. As for the supporting cast, they all brought their best game to the table. Millicent Simmons reprises her role as Regan, now more confident and resourceful than ever before. Her portrayal of a deaf character navigating a post-apocalyptic world full of sound is truly remarkable. The dynamic between her and Noah Jupe's character adds a much-needed dose of hope and resilience to the otherwise bleak narrative. In conclusion, A Quiet Place Part Second boasts an incredibly talented cast who brought John Krasinski's vision to life with unwavering dedication and skill. While the film may not be perfect, its strength lies in its ability to engage audiences emotionally through compelling performances and masterful use of sound and silence. Now, Timothy, I have a question for you. Many critics have drawn comparisons between A Quiet Place Part Second's use of sound and silence and that of Stanley Kubrick's classic film The Shining. What do you think about these comparisons? Do you see any artistic influence from one film to the other?
Well, Tom, I can see where some might draw comparisons between A Quiet Place Part Second and The Shining. Both films heavily rely on sound and silence to build suspense and create a sense of unease. However, I wouldn't go as far as saying that one film has directly influenced the other.
Yes.
There are some similarities in the way they use sound to heighten tension. But ultimately, A Quiet Place Part Second is its own unique beast. Firstly, the primary focus of The Shining is on the psychological horror aspect, whereas A Quiet Place Part Second is more about survival and family dynamics in a post-apocalyptic world. While both films employ silence to amplify certain moments, they do so for different purposes. In The Shining, the silence represents isolation and madness creeping up on characters, while in A Quiet Place Part Second, it signifies desperate quietude necessary for survival against powerful and highly sensitive predators. Secondly, Kubrick's masterpiece often plays with audience expectation, subverting them to create moments of shock and terror, whereas Krasinski's sequel is more straightforward in its approach. But the stakes are always clearly established from the outset. It's not so much about playing with audience expectations as it is about delivering on them effectively. Lastly, I think the most significant difference between these two films lies in their respective directorial styles. While both directors are masters of suspense and atmosphere, Kubrick's approach is more surreal, psychological, and often subjective, while Krasinski's style leaned more towards realism, grounding the story in relatable human emotions and experiences. In conclusion, while there may be some superficial similarities between A Quiet Place Part Second and The Shining regarding their use of sound and silence to create suspense, I wouldn't go as far as saying that one film has directly influenced the other. They are two separate entities with different narrative focuses, tonalities, and directorial styles. Now, Thomas, let's hear your thoughts on this matter. Do you agree with my assessment? Or do you see any more artistic influences from The Shining that I might have overlooked?
Well, Timothy, I think you make some valid points regarding the differences between A Quiet Place Part Second and The Shining. However, I still stand by my earlier statement that there are indeed some superficial similarities in their use of sound and silence to build suspense. Both films employ these techniques masterfully to create an atmosphere of unease and dread that's tangible on screen. That being said, A Quiet Place Part Second is its own unique beast, as you mentioned earlier. It's a thrilling continuation of the first film, with even more stakes raised for the surviving members of the Abbott family. As for the performances, I stand by my previous statement that the entire cast delivered exceptional performances, particularly the young stars Noah Jupe and Millicent Simmons. Their portrayal of two resourceful and resilient characters navigating a post-apocalyptic world full of danger is truly commendable. The chemistry between them is genuine, adding another layer of depth to their characters' relationship. In conclusion, A Quiet Place Part Second is an engaging sequel that lives up to the high standards set by its predecessor. While it may not be perfect, its strength lies in its ability to keep viewers on edge from start to finish. It's a testament to John Krasinski's growth as a director and storyteller who expertly balances suspense, drama, and even some well-placed moments of levity. I give A Quiet Place Part Second a solid 8 out of 10 stars.
Well, Thomas, I must say that your rating surprised me considering your usual taste for horror films. But as the saying goes, different strokes for different folks. In my humble opinion, A Quiet Place Part Second is an adequate sequel that suffers from a bit of sequel in it. Don't get me wrong, there were some tense and well-executed sequences scattered throughout the film. However, I found myself wishing for more innovation and originality rather than simply rehashing elements from the first movie. That being said, the young talents Noah Jupe and Millicent Simmons really shine in their respective role, adding a much-needed spark of hope and resilience to the otherwise bleak narrative. Emily Blunt once again proves her acting prowess as the reluctant leader who will do anything to protect her family. even if it means going against her own moral compass. In conclusion, A Quiet Place Part Second is a decent sequel that fails to match the freshness and originality of its predecessor. While it does deliver some thrilling moments and commendable performances, it ultimately falls short of becoming a true cinematic classic. I give it a generous 5 out of 10 stars. Now, before we wrap things up, I wanted to remind our viewers that we welcome your thoughts, comments, and opinions on this video. Please don't hesitate to leave a comment below, subscribe to our channel, and hit that all-important like button to show us some love and support. Thanks for joining us today, folks, and until next time, stay safe and keep quiet.